of days ago, we posted a video, fishermen, how to be able to have an endless supply of worm bait. Essentially, we were creating a small vermicomposting bin, which is a system where you have earthworms, specifically red wigglers, do the composting for you in a small tote. Now, on that video, I told you that the bottom holes were a 1/16 drill bit, and the holes on the side and in the lid were a 3/32. Well, we brought in our larger composting bin, and it looks like I had significantly larger size holes in that one. So I'm going to go ahead and up the size a little bit for some of the holes. I think it's still a good idea to have a lot of smaller holes, but I am going to put a few larger holes in to make sure there's enough ventilation and drainage in the bin. So for the top one, the top lid and the gap side area, I'm going to use a 5/32 drill bit. It's smaller than the one we did for our larger bin, but this is a smaller scale, so I don't think we need it quite as big. And then for the bottom, I'm going to add some 3/32 drill bit size holes. Again, not as many as I drilled before. I'm just going to maybe convert a few of those into the larger size to make sure there is that adequate drainage. So if you can, so we've added some more larger holes, no sir, for the adequate drainage. To assemble. So again, this is just to collect the worm juice, the liquids that come through as the food decomposes and as the worms eat the food and turn it into worm castings, which is also called the gardener's black gold. We're going to take our bin that has the holes in it and set it on top. Again, notice that your ventilation holes are exposed, and that's the beauty of these roughneck Rubbermaid totes, because the handles force the gap to be there. And then we are going to take some shredded paper. Now this is the non-glossy paper, so it can be newsprint paper, aka newspaper, or even bills, as long as it's not smooth and slick and glossy. If you can't tell the difference, I would suggest just stick with newspaper. You can also use copier paper or printer paper, but I've actually seen a video, and if I can find it, I'll try to link it up here, where they did a side-by-side comparison of vermicomposting or worm composting with printer paper versus newsprint. And the printer paper, I believe, was gray, whereas the worm casting from printer paper was gray, whereas the newsprint paper was black. So the bleach in your copier paper will actually make a difference in the color of your finished worm castings. Thought that was kind of interesting. Thank you, Malachi. All right, nope, you gotta leave that in here. So now we need to add in some food scraps. Mister. Thank you. Can you step to the side? You gonna help? Okay, here, stand here. So these are sweet potato peels from the sweet potato dish that we made, and we'll link that video here. Oh, let's get all of it. And there's some banana peels because somebody loves bananas. Oh, we gotta leave it in there. That's for the worms now. We ate the inside. Now the worms get to eat the peel. And an old tea bag. Just make sure when you put tea bags in that it doesn't have a staple in it. Some brands just tie the string. Some brands don't have string, and then other brands will actually staple the string to the tea bag. If you could also get the other yogurt container. And these are also the slips or sprouts from the sweet potatoes that we picked off before we peeled the potatoes. Thank you, Malachi. And then there are paper towels. Again, paper towels are bleached, so that might make your worm castings a little lighter as well. But again, that's just your comfort level on what biodegradable products you want to put in here. One important thing to note is when you start your worm bin, you either need to start with some actual dirt in it, or you can use coffee grounds. Reason being, as earthworms digest their food, they need grit to be able to process that food, kind of like chickens. So you got to add some sort of gritty material so that they can eat the food scraps for you and turn it into compost. All right, I'm going to hand that back. We also added in some orange peel. Now, I will say that a lot of people say don't put citrus in there. In my opinion, as long as there's not a lot of it, it's just very minor amounts, it should be fine. But the worms will probably eat that as a last resort. But if your goal is to have an outlet for your food scraps, you can put that in there. Now they do say don't put cheese, don't put dairy, and don't put meat. And if you're keeping your composting bin indoors, I would agree with that. But for the outdoor composting pit, we don't worry about that. Anything that we can eat, we put out there. And if you want to see some good commentary on that, check out David the Good's website. We'll have to link it below because right now I can't remember what it's called. But David the Good has a YouTube channel, and he also has a website that he uploads onto daily. So make sure to check him out. Maybe we'll link a video of his here. All right. Now, honestly, that is a lot of food, and I wouldn't add this much every day. But since we're getting it started out and we want to make sure that those earthworms get well established, we're just going to start it this way. What I'm going to suggest that my brother-in-law do is when he gets home, he's already got some worms and some dirt. I would say go ahead and top this off with about 2 or 3 inches of the dirt, and if there are any worms. And that way it'll kind of help keep the smell down. You can also add extra shredded paper to help keep the smell down, because the important thing is to keep it covered. If you put so much food in there that it's not covered by a couple of inches of either bedding material, the shredded paper, or or dirt, it's going to have a smell. So make sure you only add enough food that you don't need to step in that. All right, well, he's just going to have to get cleaned up later. Make sure you only add enough food that will allow you to still be able to cover it adequately to keep down the dirt. Or, sorry, to keep down the smell. And that will also keep down those pests we were talking about, like mites and the gnats and flies. So now we're going to reach into one of our existing worm bins and find some earthworms. These are red wigglers that I purchased years ago. And I'm trying to remember. Thank you, Malachi. Trying to remember the name of the guy. We'll link his information down below as well. And we're just going to put them in there. Let them find their new home. Here, why don't I set this here? That way you can help out easier.
Just leave it in there, Malachi.
And there aren't tons of earthworms in this one because this was one we had split before. And it's been cold, so their metabolism has slowed down and their activity has...
Malachi!
No! You don't want to eat that.
Thank you.
It's gotten cold and their metabolism has slowed down, so their production and repopulation has slowed down as well. You can also put eggshells in it, but it will make it compost down slower. Let me see. Okay, and I want to show this. We'll see if the phone, if you can see this little brown thing, I believe that is an egg, a worm egg. So that means that your worms are reproducing, which is a good thing. All right, let's add in a couple more good ones. Good job. Now, in the interim, until they get home and can add in some more dirt. Woo, good. Okay, let's stop. Let's stop. And we'll put the lid back on ours. Yay! Since we ran out of paper to shred, I'm just going to put a paper bag on top to kind of help keep everything contained and keep some of the smell down. Thankfully, they're not having to go far. All right, and now we put on the lid. Now the other thing I probably ought to mention is you do not want to let your dirt or food level or really even the bedding get above or to the point of these ventilation holes at the top. You always want your bedding material to be below those ventilation holes so that that airflow can come in adequately.
Would you say maybe about an inch below?
Just as long as it's below.
Okay.
I don't know if I have any worms left in my other one or not.
Well,
But
these in here should be enough, even if you don't. But I would say still go ahead and add your dirt on top, at least some, to help again with the smell. You may also, for a few days, want to take the lid off and offset it, because I'm going to be honest, there are some mites in there because the conditions haven't been the best out there. And if it gets too wet, that's when you have more issue with the mites and the fly.
now, if there's worms in there and are night crawlers, will that hurt? Or is there...
No. Night crawler, my understanding is night crawlers tend not to do as well in these kind of systems because night crawlers are more of a vertical eater. So they do better out in the garden because they go up and down more. I'm going to show you on an established bed how you can feed your worms. The recommendation is to do pockets. You'll scoop out a little bit of the dirt, put a little bit of food in, and then cover it back. And then a few days later, or maybe if you feed just once a week, you move to the next spot. Move the dirt, put in some food, and then cover it back up and move to the next. And you do it on a rotation so that by the time you get back to that first spot, the worms hopefully will have broken down that food fairly well. And they'll just follow the food as they go. Now it's interesting to note that the earthworms won't actually start really eating the food until it starts decomposing. So something like some carrots that have stayed in your fridge a little bit too long and have already started getting a tiny bit goopy, yeah, those are great for the worms. The only thing is, again, there is going to be a smell if you don't cover it up well enough. So just be cognizant of that. If you're wondering what these 2 liter bottle cutoffs are in here for, I was trying out a method to be able to harvest some worms like the super lazy way. And we'll link the video there where I got that idea from Morag Gamble's channel. She's an Australian homesteader. They actually have a permaculture center there, and she's got some really great ideas on vermicomposting and then also herbs and gardening in general, especially with the no-till method. So I'm cheating. You can use a trowel. I would actually recommend that if you don't want to get nastiness all under your fingernails. I've got some paper in here and I'm just using it to kind of dig a hole. Yeah, it's kind of wet, huh? And to be honest, this bin is a little more wet than it needs to be. But we honestly haven't been tending these as well as we should have. So you just pour some in and then cover it up. Can you cover it? Can you stick that in? Feed the worms? Thank you. We'll tuck it in right there. And I'm going to go ahead and do one more spot because we haven't fed these worms in a little while. Just so we can start getting the production up a little bit. And I'm not necessarily following the procedure I was telling you where you go here, 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 here. But we don't feed them all that often, so it won't be as big of a deal. But if you want it high production, it just tends to work out better if you can get a system where you rotate. But until I move these out of here, I really don't have those spots ready yet. Alrighty. And then once we get some more newspaper shredded, we will add on a good layer of, newspaper. Oh, and did you know that earthworms actually glow? We were walking to my, to the barn at my parents' place when I was in high school, and it had rained pretty heavily, and it was nighttime, so we had a flashlight to walk. And we kept seeing this like fluorescent little dots on the wet road, and we were like, what in the world is that? Well, we turned the flashlight on one of them, and it was the earthworms, the night crawlers, coming out because the ground was so saturated that they would drown if they stayed in the dirt. And they were coming out and crossing the road, and so they had this natural fluorescence in their body, and so they glow in the dark. So my mom and I were like, well, maybe that's where that song comes from, the glowworm.
Hey Cloud Hoppers, thanks for watching the video. Push the thumbs up to like the video. Also hit that subscribe button, also the bell, so that you can get notifications when our videos come out.
Check us out on our social media pages too. We have Facebook and Pinterest, and soon we'll have Instagram. The links are below. Bye, y'all.
Bye. Good job.